All right, hi everybody. Welcome back to another episode. This is Blink or Steve, take your pick. And today I'm going to run through another games I bought recently. This is actually going to be a little bit of a different episode for a couple different reasons. One is I have a little bit of a frog in my throat. I'm a little bit under the weather, so there might be a few extra cuts and stuff. And the other is that I haven't had a chance to play all of these yet, or even most of these yet. Because really I just wanted to get this video out ahead of Midwest Gaming Classic, which is coming up this weekend. So this is everything not Midwest Gaming Classic related that I've bought in probably the last month and a half, 2 months. And then obviously I'll have another games I bought recently video coming out after I get back from Midwest Gaming Classic, talking about my time there and showing what I picked up from the convention. So I'll give you the impressions on what I have played and we'll kind of run through. This time we have... Looks like this is mostly a PS4 and a Vita themed episode, a lot of newer stuff. But there are a couple other little things in here. The first of which is Mole Mania. So this is the only Game Boy game I've bought recently. And for anyone that's not familiar with Mole Mania, this is one of the lesser known games from Shigeru Miyamoto. I think before he was with Nintendo. And I bought it because it's a really fun puzzle game that graphically is pretty similar to Link's Awakening, or at least I think it is, and the sound effects are pretty similar to Link's Awakening too. You play as the mole, and every stage has an above ground and a below ground layer, and your objective is on that single screen stage to roll a metal ball into sort of this cracked pillar to progress to the next screen. And there are walls that block your way both above ground and below ground. There are enemies. And then there's a lot of little minutia to how those puzzles play out that's really interesting. You can dig anywhere in the dirt to go from one layer to another, but when you do dig, it creates a hole. And objects you push around will fall into the holes and stuff like that, so you have to make sure that you are putting your holes in intelligent places, navigating the stage not entirely haphazardly, and figuring out where to go. And this is a really fun game. Honestly, I had this game on my wishlist for a while, and finally a local copy showed up at one of the game stores that I frequent, and I was happy to pick it up because this game is a ton of fun. I think this one doesn't get talked about too much on the Game Boy, but it's a shame because this game is really good. Next up, kind of showing a little bit of the age of these pickups, we have Resident Evil 2. Trying not to get too much glare there for you. So I played all the way through Resident Evil 2, and I loved this remake. Honestly, Resident Evil 2 was the very first game I got for my original PlayStation when I got it. I remember I went out to Best Buy for my birthday that year with my dad, and I picked up a PlayStation 1 and Resident Evil 2. And just like when I played it on the original PlayStation, I played through the Claire campaign this time too, and had an absolute blast. I mean, this is a perfect example of how you should modernize one of those old classic games. Completely redone, beautiful graphics engine. It keeps most of the same puzzles and environments and things, but completely modernizes them, changes it up in a couple of ways here and there. But this game plays like you remember Resident Evil 2 playing, which I think is the way a remake should be done. Make it feel like it existed in your head, even if the version in your head doesn't have all the blemishes that the older versions might have had. So, yeah, definitely check out Resident Evil 2 if you haven't yet. This one was impressive. Capcom's doing good stuff. Getting to a couple games that I haven't had the opportunity to play yet. The first is Headlander. I know that this is a sort of Metroid-style, I guess, platform adventure game. All I really know about it is that the head comes off and you can connect to different bodies. I was interested in this game when it first came out, but I had a suspicion that it would get a physical release eventually, and it did. This got a release through limited run. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to playing that when the opportunity presents itself. Same type of thing, another limited run game that showed up finally is Rain World. This one just seemed like it had a really great art style. There's not much information on the back to really tell you a whole lot about the game, but this is another Adult Swim's game that limited run put out, and I'm looking forward to checking that one out too. Right. Next up, we have Valkyrian Arc on the PlayStation 4. This is, I think it's a combination of kind of like a role-playing game slash school sim building game almost. Not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure you build a school, and then there are RPG elements that go into kind of the interstitial scenes between that. This game, for some reason, I don't know much about it, but it launched really cheap and started getting cheaper immediately. I think it was brand new for 20. I don't know if it launched at 20 or if it just dropped to 20 really fast. But it seemed like it could be interesting, and for I don't know, like $12 or whatever I bought it for, it was like, yeah, why not? I'll take a chance on that game when I'm in the mood for kind of a different RPG at some point or another. Next up, we have a good handful of Vita games. First here is Sayonara Umehara Kawase. So this is another one of the Umehara Kawase games ported to the Vita by Strictly Limited Games. I've played one Umehara Kawase game. It was on the PlayStation Portable, on the PSP. And these are really interesting games. You essentially play as this girl with a fishing rod, and you hook the fishing rod onto different platforms, and then through a really unique physics engine, you kind of swing yourself around through the levels on top of platforms and stuff like that. It plays very differently from anything you've ever really experienced before. The physics engine is very unique in these games. So think like Bionic Commando kind of swinging, but then really weird physics that takes a lot of practice to get used to. Once you get good at it, they feel great. You start swinging around levels like crazy. You look like you really know what you're doing, but it takes a while to learn. So I was happy to pick that one up on the Vita. And then we actually have a whole stack of Vita coming up here. First one is Super Hydora. Super Hydora is a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up, I believe. Yeah, it is a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up. I just couldn't remember if it had kind of Metroid levels or not. But I actually owned this game on the PlayStation 4, played it very, very briefly, and I decided to swap out my PlayStation 4 copy for a Vita copy. I sort of have decided that any game that has a Vita release, I want to try to get the Vita version. I'm just so invested in the Vita, and I love that handheld so much that I figure I might as well see it through to the end of its life. So I traded out my PS4 copy for this Vita one. And then another limited run release, King of Fighters 97. I haven't popped this one open yet. These old fighters are fun if you have someone to play with, but I don't have anyone to play with right now. So I will get around to picking this one up and playing through at least the arcade mode at some point. And it's not a game that I played back in the day. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to see where this one goes, but not too much to say on that one. And then these last three kind of were like, they feel like the last hurrah from Nipponichi, at least North American Nipponichi. And that is The Lost Child, The Longest 5 Minutes, and Penny Punching Princess. Penny Punching Princess and The Longest 5 Minutes, these two were ones that I was really interested in playing on the Switch. And they were on my wish list. I was waiting for like a buy two get one or something for me to pick them up, and I just never got around to them by the time they announced the Vita versions. And again, I like to try to get the Vita version when I can, and so I waited for these Vita games to come out. And they launched at I think only $30, so they were a little bit discounted. And then The Lost Child wasn't really on my radar, but it was launching alongside these other two, and it looks like an interesting role-playing game. And it feels like these, they're almost like a send-off for the Vita in the way. Like I know Limited Run, Super Rare, all those companies have games coming out over the next handful of months. But in terms of like Nipponichi, Xseed, Axis, those releases are really starting to wind down. And so I sort of wanted to get these as a send-off for the system. Plus, they're all games that I am interested in playing. I just haven't had the opportunity to yet. On my Vita lately, I've been playing through a lot of Cosmic Star Heroine. But I will pick up and play these here, hopefully within the next month or two. Thankfully, the summer has a handful of releases that I'm interested in, but no like huge time-consuming games. So I think I'll have a good opportunity to get through some of the backlog here when the summer finally hits. All right, we've got all PS4 games left except for a Wii U game. And this is Axiom Verge. I think most people have probably heard the story at this point, and I don't have all the details. But for anybody that isn't aware, this is probably going to be the last Wii U physical game that comes out, put out by Limited Run Games. And the reason it took so long to come out is because there was some, I guess, legal trouble with the original publisher, Badland Games. And essentially, people didn't get paid or money didn't exchange hands where it was supposed to. And so that held up the production of this game. I do have this on the Vita, but it's just too interesting to see this game come out for the Wii U when the Switch has already been out for 2 years. And I really couldn't pass it up. I don't know if this is the version I'll finally play through when I do get around to playing Axiom Verge, but I just thought that this was neat and worth checking out. And a bunch of PlayStation 4 coming up. First up, we have Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. This is the complete edition. I got this from a friend of mine named Tyler. He played through this game a little bit, I think, didn't really get into it, and I was telling him that I was interested in playing through it because I kind of wanted a big, meaty RPG at some point. He said he had the complete edition, and we negotiated a trade. The trade was he gave this to me, and I bought him a burrito from a local restaurant. So I think a pretty good trade for both sides. This comes with all the DLC and stuff, so when I'm ready to give up 200 hours of my life, this will be what I go for. Bought this game. It's an import by the name of Silence. It seems like it's sort of a narrative-driven, episodic game, maybe like Telltale minus the really stressful decision-making. But, sorry about the glare there. This game seemed really interesting. I saw some video footage of it when I was looking around for different types of, like import-only games. And yeah, I think this will be a fun one to play through. It took like a month to ship to me, so it just came recently. I haven't had a chance to pop it in, but this one should be an interesting one to check out. Oof, this is a big one. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. So obviously the latest game from Software, a huge title to come out, probably the biggest one to come out for a lot of people so far this year. I don't really have the time to go into all of my thoughts on this game. I actually recorded a video of my initial impressions, and I ended up never posting it just because by the time I got it edited and put together, it didn't feel like it was fully reflective of how I felt. And so who knows, maybe I'll put up a full review or something of this at some point. But essentially, the short version of this is it has a lot of the qualities that make the Dark Souls games very good. But it is a little bit more difficult than those previous games, I think. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion around the difficulty in this game, and different people have different reactions to it. For me personally, which is all I can really speak for here, I will say that I think that the difficulty in some of the boss fights was a little harder than I personally enjoy. This game has some great moments. I think most of the non-boss encounters are incredible in the same way that the FromSoft games always are. But I think that some of the boss fights a little bit eke past that line of difficulty where I personally stop having fun. Not to say that that isn't tuned perfectly for someone else or that it's a bad game at all, but it is something to be aware of. And it kind of taught me a little bit about myself where traditionally I loved games like Dark Souls. I love games like Super Meat Boy. And I kind of thought like, yeah, the harder the better. And I realized that there is a point where for me personally, difficulty can start to swing back in the other direction and lower my overall opinion of something. So it's a great game. It is fun. It is beautiful. It is interesting in all the ways that Dark Souls games are, but it is going to be hit or miss for people depending on how they can handle that difficulty. And yeah, I think I need to sit on this one a little bit more. But ultimately right now, I think I land on it being a very good game, but probably my least favorite of the FromSoft games that have come out recently. So below the Dark Souls games, and below Demon Souls and below Bloodborne. But very cool nonetheless. This is definitely one you have to form your own opinion on. It's so divisive. This one just came yesterday in the mail, Tacoma. This is the follow-up to Gone Home by Fulbright. This is one that I've been waiting forever to play and had really no excuse not to until, again, Limited Run decided to release it physically, so I said perfect. And yeah, this one I'll probably sit down with Leah and she and I will play it together because we played through Gone Home together, and this will be just like that. So looking forward to that. 4 games left. This one actually was on an unboxing video that I did that you can check out on the channel. This is Wonder Boy Returns, a remake of a classic platformer. I spoke a little bit more about it in that video if you want to hear any more thoughts on it. We have Tempest 4000. This is more Tempest for people that like Tempest. It's really hard to say much more than that. If you like the older Tempest games, this is certainly more of that. It didn't immediately hook me in the same way some older Tempest games have. There's actually recently an exhibit highlighting old game series and old game developers at the Science Museum here locally, like a month ago. And I went to that, and they had a bunch of old arcade cabinets set up, one of which was an old Tempest cab. And I played a ton of Tempest because I love Tempest to death. And playing on an actual Tempest cab is just so cool. So after playing that, this one had a little bit less of the shine compared to an actual cabinet. So I didn't put a ton of time into it, but I mean, this game is absolutely dirt cheap. It's like a $5 game. So if you are in the mood for Tempest, you might as well pick it up. And then 2 more games. I have played through both of these. The first one is The Occupation. This game is cool. Essentially, you play as a journalist, and you're placed into an environment, and you have 1 real-time hour to find a bunch of leads, find clues, investigate this mystery going on, talk to people, gather evidence, and then that hour culminates in you interviewing someone, presenting the evidence that you have accumulated throughout that hour. So you spend an hour kind of sneaking through these big, well-connected, intricate environments, very similar, almost like to a Deus Ex game. And then you get to the actual interview and you start trying to flesh out the narrative and figure out the truth behind this mystery, this like political mystery, through the evidence that you found. A ton of fun, very stressful, very interesting, very unique. I ended up getting a bad ending in this game because I did not crush it in all of the interview sections. It can be pretty difficult your first time through, but a great game for multiple replays and super fun. I haven't heard anyone talking about this game, and it's a blast. It's unique. There's nothing else like it out there, and it kind of, I don't know, it really does make you feel like an investigative journalist, I guess. So check out The Occupation. That one is good. And the last one here is The Aquatic Adventures of the Last Human. So this is the first release of a new limited run game style company called Hard Copy Games. I don't know if that'll focus, but there's their logo right there. I don't think it will. But The Aquatic Adventures of the Last Human is really cool. This is sort of a boss rush game set underwater. So think Shadow of the Colossus or Fury or something like that, in the setting of this beautiful kind of pixelated 2D Metroid style environment. You play as the submarine, you unlock new weapons, and you fight huge bosses. You fight krakens and huge seahorses and stuff like that. The boss fights all feel really varied and interesting. Honestly, the boss fights have a little bit of a Souls vibe to them, where there's these huge, larger-than-life creatures with patterns that you need to learn and dodge, and all of the fights kind of immediately feel sort of insurmountable until you have mastered their patterns and can take them down relatively easily once you've done so. There are a couple like puzzle-type bosses, stuff like that. But this game totally caught me by surprise. I took a chance on it because it was from, like I said, this new company, Hard Copy Games, and I was like, okay, let's see what type of releases they're putting out. And this was their first one, and I think the only one they've released to date. And I think this game was awesome. One of the best games I've played in a really long time. I ended up going through this entire game in one sitting, like a 6-hour sitting, because I just couldn't put the controller down. I was hooked. The music is good. It's visually awesome. It has like this really good combination of sort of quiet, ambient, calming moments with sort of eerie, weird, biomechanical, underwater architecture and stuff like that. And the boss fights are all really fun. The weapons that you get make progression feel interesting. It's just, yeah, this game totally deserves more recognition than it's getting. I don't know if you can still buy this hard copy somewhere, but I do think you can get this digitally on Steam and stuff like that. So I would encourage everyone to check this game out, The Aquatic Adventures of the Last Human. Definitely one of my favorite games that I've played this year. Don't know if this came out this year, though. It might have come out last year or 2 years ago, but a great game nonetheless. And that's it. A little bit more rapid fire than I normally do because, like I said, I haven't had a chance to play all of those games, but wanted to get the slate clean and ready for Midwest Gaming Classic 2019 coming up here this weekend, which is going to be a ton of fun. As always, if you enjoyed your time, if there's anything interesting here that you think you might check out and play yourself, let me know. Otherwise, let me know what you've been picking up lately. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want to come back and hang out again. And if not, look forward to the next video, which will most likely be covering Midwest Gaming Classic. Thank you, as always, for watching. It's always cool when someone cares enough to watch, so thank you. And until next time, take care. Bye.